wanted to sit down. I didn't know that they did it. I just knew they did something.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. It's a lovely crowd, a large crowd in the rain. It's an honor to be here today. And if I speak too loud or speak too quietly, please let me know. I'd like to welcome you. Good afternoon. My name is Henry Kenrack. I'm honored to be the chairperson of Kansas City's 2024 Yom Hashoah Holocaust Memorial Service. I welcome you to our program commemorating 81 years since the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the 61st anniversary of the dedication of the memorial to the 6 million, and 79 years since the end of World War II. We gather here today in difficult times. We acknowledge the distress felt by so many as we see continued spikes in anti-Semitic incidents worldwide. We thank you for joining us today as we pause to focus on Holocaust remembrance, acknowledging the singular and unique space it occupies in world history and the consciousness of humanity. In keeping with the solemnity of this occasion, we request that you please silence all devices and hold your applause. Also note that following today's program in the theater, friends and families of survivors and those who perished in the Holocaust are invited to gather at the memorial to 6 million to recite an additional cottage prayer. If you're able, please stand for the presentation of colors by Mocan Post 605 of the Jewish war veterans who remain standing for the Star-Spangled Banner and Hatikvah, sung by the HBHA Hebrew Academy Choir, and the Pledge of Allegiance led by representatives of Scout Troop 661.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Today we remember those lives lost in the Holocaust. Those 6 million Jews who represented entire generations murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators in a quest for what they termed a final solution of the Jewish question. We remember them not as a collective 6 million, but as individuals, each of whom was living a full life. The Holocaust was not a single crime committed against millions, but rather the same crime committed millions of times over, experienced uniquely and individually by all it touched. We also remember the culture of European Jewry, a vibrant society of diverse thought, determining their path forward in changing times. The process cut short by the Holocaust and never fully realized. A culture that was carried forward by survivors in new homes without the generational memory and support that would have fostered it as it was developing in Europe. Today we also honor the survivors, those who often found themselves as the last surviving remnant of their families and communities. We pay tribute to their resilience and fortitude. They moved forward from profound loss to rebuild their lives and reconstitute their families as refugees in a new country. We are grateful for their legacy they provided, sharing their testimony for future generations, ensuring that Holocaust education is prioritized, institutionalizing remembrance in the form of commemorative ceremonies like our program today, and their greatest legacy, their children and their grandchildren. The survivors' collective wish that their experiences be remembered and serve as a warning and as a call to action in our world today resonates profoundly in our own time. I now call upon Rabbi David Glickman of Congregation Beth Shalom.
Thank you to Shelley Klein, to Dr. Canarak, and to the entire committee for planning and putting together what is always such an important and meaningful Yom Hashoah ceremony for our community here. On April 20th, 1945, 5 days after the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp was liberated, British Army chaplain Rabbi Leslie Hartman led a Friday night evening service. I will add, you can see this on YouTube, and I recommend going and searching for it because it is so inspiring. He led this service for a few hundred survivors of Bergen-Belsen. Knowing that the service was being recorded by Patrick Walker of the BBC radio service, a Jewish army chaplain proclaimed at the conclusion, Am Yisrael Chai, the children of Israel still liveth, after the group sang the Zionist anthem Hatikva at the conclusion of the service. I don't know if the prophetic cry, Am Yisrael Chai, the children of Israel liveth, has ever meant more between that fateful Shabbat in the liberated Bergen-Belsen 79 years ago until today. We need to be saying Am Yisrael Chai constantly this year. The world actually has 2 days on its calendar to commemorate and memorialize the Holocaust. In January, the world celebrated International Holocaust Remembrance Day. This day was initiated by the United Nations in 2005, 60 years after the end of World War II. The day was chosen because it was the day that the Red Army liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp. The day that we come together for is Yom Hashoah. It is a day that is not linked to the day when the Allies liberated Auschwitz. It is instead linked to the date of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Though the uprising actually began during Pesach, as many here know, the Israeli Knesset chose the first appropriate day after the conclusion of Passover for Yom Hashoah. As Israel was actively creating new rituals for remembrance, its leaders were conscious of not wanting the liberation of Pesach to outshine the liberation of the Warsaw Ghetto's freedom fighters, or vice versa. Both of these days are important, and they hold different resonances for us. The UN Day in January gives us the opportunity to give true hakarat hatov, gratitude and recognition for the Allied forces who defeated the Nazis. The ultimate defeat of the Nazis might be the most heroic moment for any international collaboration against evil. And while it is important to remember and to have gratitude for the righteousness of our non-Jewish neighbors and the other nations when appropriate, we also need to remember that the Jews were not helpless damsels in distress being rescued by knights in shining armor. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that took place in the spring of 1943 was the most famous example of so many millions of acts of resistance that happened throughout the entire Shoah. Many of those fighters in the ghetto would later carry arms to fight for the independence of Israel just 5 years later. And resistance came in so many forms during the Shoah. For some, it was physical violent resistance that we saw in the ghetto. But for others, it was the ability to retain faith, even in the darkest moments in the camps. For still others, resistance was beginning new life before, during, or after liberation, like we know here. Finding love, creating families, restarting a life from nothing. We in Kansas City are eternally indebted to the community of survivors that found this little island in the middle of the Midwest to start new lives, become new Americans, and raise up our entire community. And we are so blessed to commemorate this day, not only with survivors, but with second generation, third generation, fourth generation. And do we have any fifth generation survivors this year? We will. The name that the Knesset gave to this sacred day so many decades ago was Yom HaZikaron LaShoah ULaGvura, the day of remembrance both for the Holocaust and for Gevurah, strength. The day of remembering the Shoah and the heroism. As we continue this tradition in our community, this is my prayer. Ribbono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, we pray that you give us all the strength to realize that Gvura, strength and resistance, is a mitzvah incumbent on all of us, whether or not we ourselves were actually survivors or descendants of survivors or not. All of us need to strengthen ourselves. We need to summon Gvura so that we can all be resistors to evil, to hatred, to anti-Semitism, and to complicity. Amen. I now want to invite up Kurt Kavanaugh of the Jewish Community Center, one of the organizing agencies of this commemoration.
On behalf of the three sponsoring organizations, the Jewish Community Center of Greater Kansas City, the Midwest Center for Holocaust Education, and the Jewish Community Relations Bureau of the American Jewish Committee, welcome. Yom means day, and Shoah means utter destruction. Yom Hashoah is a day of remembrance that began in 1951. The term specifically refers to the atrocities that were committed against the Jewish people during World War II and the murders of the 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. Given this past year's events, this Yom HaShoah service is both timely and bittersweet. Yom HaShoah is important, and I can't stress it enough. It is something so important that you feel it in your kishkis. Now, some of us in this room have felt it our entire lives. We lost relatives in the Holocaust and may have even experienced the horrors firsthand. Some of us in this room felt it for the first time 10 years ago, after a shooter attacked our Kansas City Jewish community. Some of us felt it on October 7th, after learning of the barbaric attack on Israel. Some of us has felt it even more recently, since there's been a rise of anti-Semitism, not only in this country, but worldwide. And some of us, Jews and non-Jews alike, have yet to register how important it is to never forget. Martin E. Muller, prominent pastor in Nazi Germany, wrote the following. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Honoring those we have lost is a mitzvah, and learning from the past is critical. That means those whose family died in the Shoah, as well as all of us who were not even born yet, need to acknowledge and remember the 6 million Jews who were lost. Lador Lador, from generation to generation. Gathering as a community at this time of hate and bigotry in the world is so important. There is strength when we stand together. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sending the message that we will never forget and we will always remember. We now welcome back this year's chair, Henry Canarak, to share memories of his father, Dr. Joseph Canarak.
Now take a deep breath, please. Because that's what I have to do to be able to present this talk, this presentation. So can we hear it? What an incredible thing to talk about. Your family member, my father in the Holocaust. And of course, what happened in 6 million lives. I want to thank my wife, Christy Canarak, who prepared this talk. She knew I was not going to be able to do this, just too overwhelming. But thank you, honey. This was not part of the script. I also want to thank Jessica Rockhold, the executive director of the MCHE, and Shelley Klein, all their work, hard work that they do to keep this alive, to keep this going. We called on them to get involved in our children's school. So I suggest that if you need someone to speak about the Holocaust, to your organizations, your workplace, your schools, please call on them. They're experts, they know what they're doing. Joseph Canarac, born July 23rd, 1926, in Plum, Poland. Joseph's parents, Herschel and Golda Canarac. I'm here to honor and tell the story of Dr. Joseph Canarac and his family and the 6 million Jews that were murdered by the Nazi Germans from 1939 to 1942. My father, Joseph Canarac, was the firstborn child of Herschel and Golda Gina Canarac, July 23rd, 1926, in Plonsk, Poland. Growing up as next-door neighbors, their friendship turned to love, followed by marriage. Herschel was a trader of cattle and horses. Golda was a seamstress. He would occasionally tell stories of how he would ride to school in a horse and buggy. And in the winters, my father would ride in a horse and buggy, but actually a sleigh, with beaver blankets covering him to keep him warm. Some of his favorite memories were accompanying his father to area farms to look at horses and cattle. His sister Raquel, followed a few years later, and their family was complete. My father lived close and had a very large extended family. My grandfather was one of 5 boys, and my grandmother had 4 sisters and a brother. They often were all together celebrating holidays, birthdays, and other life cycle events. His cousin Sam is pictured on the left, sitting right here on the chair. My cousin Sam, or his cousin Sam, which we call Uncle Sam, we'll talk about him later once he was liberated. The only survivors in this picture are Sam, and then Goldie and Frank. Goldie was an American citizen, and she went to Plonsk, Poland, and married Frank Lesk. They both were in New York, who were sponsors of my father once he was liberated. With the outbreak of World War II on September 1st, 1939, the Germans invaded Poland, and on the 5th of September, they conquered Plonsk. At the beginning of October 1939, the city was annexed to the Berzik-Zichenau, which was an administrative region for the Nazi German province of East Prussia from 1939 to 1945. Its name changed to Poland, and military rule replaced civilian rule. Many Jews fled from Plonsk to Warsaw and the Soviet territories. On the 19th of September 1939, the Germans brought all the Jewish men aged 16 and over to the prison courtyard and registered their names. The registration process was accompanied by brutal beatings recorded by German photographers. Gestapo men from Plonsk and took 17 Jews and 40 Poles as hostage. Among them, the mayor, Pierkowski, the regional doctor, teachers, and priest. All but one were shot. In the fall of 1939, when my father was 13 years old, imagine 13 years old, the Jews of Plonsk were ordered to don the yellow star. After a while, they were ordered to add the word Judah, or Jew, to the star. Pictured here is one of my father's stars he kept throughout his life, an actual star that he wore. I saw it the first time 12 years ago. After the stars were required to be worn, all Jews were forbidden from walking on the street after 6 p.m. in order to pay all their dues from the years before the war to municipal coffers. In May 1941, the Jews of Plonsk were concentrated into a closed ghetto. At the age of 14, my father's home was confiscated by the Nazis, and he, along with his sister and parents, moved in with his grandparents into the ghetto, sharing a one-room apartment. The doors and windows of the houses that faced Warsaw Street were boarded up. The 2 sides of the ghetto were connected by Kazan Street, which was part of the ghetto. Some 8,000 Jews were imprisoned in the ghetto, half of them refugees. 3 or 4 families lived in every room. Many inhabited stables and warehouses, and some Jews built rickety booths exposed to the elements. My father would tell me a story that he would actually sneak out at night through the sewers, and the locals would give them baskets of foods to sneak back in to help feed the citizens of the ghetto. The deportations of the Jews of Plunks and the liquidation of the ghetto took place during the fall of 1942. Rumors of the deportation from the ghetto spread at the end of October 1949. Before that, during the summer, the Jews of Plunks heard about the murder of Jews in the camps from brother-in-law of Dr. Arthur Baer, who had escaped Treblinka and arrived in Plunks. At the end of October, the Germans ordered the Judenrat, which was the Jewish leaders of the ghettos in occupied Europe. They were ordered to make a list of people purportedly to be sent to labor camps. In light of the order, the Judenrat chairman, Ramek, gathered a group of public figures and told them that the Germans were considering deporting Jews from the ghetto. He speculated that the first transport would be the elderly and the sick. The Judenrat and the public representatives prepared the list of those destined for deportation. The day before the deportation, the people to be transported were gathered by the Jewish police and brought to the Beit Midrash, which is a hall dedicated for Torah study, to sleep. The next day, the 28th of October, 1942, the police took them to the train station, and from there, some 2,000 elderly and sick Jews were deported to Auschwitz. 2 weeks after the first deportation, another 2,000 Jews were sent to Auschwitz, and on 30th of November 1942, 2,000 more were transported, including Jews from the Nowa Miasto ghetto, a ghetto 12 miles east of Plunks that had arrived a few days earlier. On December 1st, 1942, my father, Joseph Canrak, he was 15 at the time, along with his sister, mother, father, aunts, uncles, and grandparents were transported to Auschwitz. My father was originally sorted to the line of women and children once they arrived in Auschwitz. He took a chance and ran to his father and uncles on the other line, on the other side of the field. On the way, an SS guard knocked him down with the butt of his rifle. Disoriented, but still able to run, my father got up and ran to the men's line. That saved his life. That was the last day my father saw his sister, his mother, and any of the women in his family. He was processed and assigned his number, which was tattooed on his arm, on December 3rd, 1942. On the 16th of December, 1942, the last transport of Jews from the Plunks ghetto left for Auschwitz. This transport contained young people, professionals, and those considered privileged by the Judenrat. They included the Judenrat chairman, Yaakov Ramek, his wife and 2 children, as well as 340 children from the children's home in the Plunks ghetto, accompanied by their teacher, Ms. Gruber. Auschwitz III was called Buna or Monowitz. It was established in October 1942. It housed prisoners assigned to work at the Buna Synthetic Rubber Works, located on the outskirts of the small village of Monowitz. In the spring of 1941, German conglomerate IG Farben, which ended up owning Bayer, Agfa, as well as Hoist, established a factory in which its executives intended to exploit concentration camp labor to manufacture synthetic rubber and fuels. IG Farben invested more than 700 million Deutschmarks, about $2.8 million US in 1941 terms, in Auschwitz III. From May 1941 until July 1942, the SS had transported prisoners from Auschwitz I to the Buna detachment, at first on foot, later by rail. With the construction of Auschwitz III in the autumn of 1942, prisoners deployed at Buna lived in Auschwitz III. Of the 3 camps established near Auschwitz, the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp had the largest total prisoner population. It was divided into 10 sections separated by electrified barbed wire fences, had SS guards, including SS dog handlers. Auschwitz-Birkenau was also a death camp and played a central role in the German effort to exterminate the Jews of Europe. Jewish deportees arriving at Auschwitz-Birkenau immediately underwent selection. The SS staff chose some of the able-bodied for forced labor and sent the rest directly to the gas chambers, which were disguised as shower installations to mislead the victims. The belongings of all the deportees were confiscated and sorted into the Canada warehouse for shipment back to Germany. Canada symbolized wealth for the prisoners. That was the name of the warehouse, and many of these objects were sent and sold back into Germany. The transfer from Birkenau to Dora Mittelbau was a chaotic one. My father and other prisoners spent 5 days in the train car. The papers of the prisoners were not sent with them during the transfer. Word spread to many of the prisoners, including my father, that they were able to remove the star designating them as Jewish prisoners. He entered this camp as a Polish prisoner of war, the Dora Mittelbau, also known as Dora Nordenhausen or Nordenhaus camp. It was established in central Germany near the southern Harz Mountains, north of the town of Nordenhaus. It was originally a sub-camp at Buchenwald. Prisoners from Buchenwald were sent to the area in 1943 to begin construction of a large industrial complex. In October 1944, the SS made Dora Mittelbau an independent concentration camp with more than 30 sub-camps. Allied air raids on industrial complexes in Germany necessitated the construction of underground production facilities. Concentration camp prisoners dug huge tunnels in the surrounding mountains to house the production and storage areas. In 1943, prisoners of Dora Mittelbau began construction of large underground factories, development facilities for the V-2 missile program, and other experimental weapons. These so-called weapons of retaliation, as the Germans called them, were constructed and stored in underground facilities and bomb-proof shelters. Until the spring of 1944, prisoners were kept mostly underground, deprived of daylight and fresh air, and enclosed in unstable tunnels. The mortality rate was higher than at most other concentration camps. Prisoners too weak or ill to work were sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau to be killed. In 1944, a compound to house forced laborers were built above ground and a large factory. Once full production of the missiles began in the fall of 1944, Dora Mittelbau had a standing prisoner population of at least 12,000. In early April 1945, the Nazis began to evacuate the prisoners from Dora Mittelbau. Within days, most of the remaining prisoners were sent to Bergen-Belsen in northern Germany. Thousands were killed during the death marches under horrendous conditions. When American forces liberated Dora Mittelbau in April 1945, only a few prisoners were left in the camp. My father was liberated April 11, 1945. The 3rd Armed Division discovers the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. The division reports back to headquarters that it has uncovered a large concentration camp near the town of Nordenhausen. Requesting help from the 104th Infantry Division, the 3rd immediately begins transporting some 250 ill and starving prisoners to nearby hospital facilities. This is the money that my father was given in the camps that he could pay for food. Actually, objects that we have in our possession. My father received his new birth certificate, May 29, 1945. With his card in hand, he was able to travel freely through Europe. He decided to travel to Frankfurt to the Zeilsheim displaced persons camp. Zeilsheim became famous for its camps created by the Allies to hold displaced persons and exiles after World War II. In 1946, it was visited by Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion and former American First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Zeilsheim maintained a Jewish theatrical group, a synagogue, a jazz orchestra, a sports club, a number of schools, including an ORT, Association for the Promotion of Skilled Trades, Vocational Training Institute, a nursing training school. The camp had a library, circulated 2 Yiddish newspapers. While my father was there, he learned that his cousin Sam had survived, and someone told him he was in Bavaria. So this pass here allowed him to travel freely within Europe. After finding his cousin Sam, the person that I showed you in the first picture of the family, he sending a note to his Uncle Frank. He found Sam, sent a note to Uncle Frank in New York, and he moved to New York. My father worked in the Hebrew Aid Society, with the Hebrew Aid Society, to get passage on the Perch to come to New York. They were organizing trips to the U.S. for liberated orphans. My father traveled back to say goodbye to his friends, missing the first boat to the United States, but he was able to catch the second boat, the Marine Perch, on May 13, 1945, and was on his way to his new life. Once on board, he was given $10 and the food he could eat, all the food that he could eat, and he had his first Coca-Cola. He said he did not like the taste and did not understand why people would drink it. He arrived May 24, 1946. They arrived in the night and docked next to the Statue of Liberty. He was so excited he hardly slept at all. He was greeted by his older cousin, Sam Gertner, which was changed to Gardner in Ellis Island, who had traveled on the first ship, and his uncle Frank Last, his mother's youngest brother, and his wife Goldie, who were in the picture I'd shown you before. My father enrolled in English classes in night school to complete high school. After graduation, he enrolled at Columbia University. The Wallenstein family, originally from Plonks, invited my dad to move to Mexico City and to attend medical school. My father met my mother, Raquel Levy, at the Jewish Community Center of Mexico City while she was playing tennis. Their courtship began, and after 3 months, he proposed to her. They got married in a big Jewish wedding in one of the oldest synagogues in Mexico City on December 19, 1954. I was born 1 year later, my sister Gina 3 years later, and after my father completed medical school in Mexico City, he was offered a 1-year internship at Menorah Medical Center in Kansas City, or a hospital in Hawaii. Menorah had offered him $50 more a month, and so they drove from Mexico City to Kansas City with 2 young children, husband and wife, in 1 car. They arrived in Kansas City in November 1958. After my father's internship, he was offered a residency in pediatrics at the University of Kansas and Children's Mercy Hospital. He completed the 3-year residency and joined Dr. Joseph Ornstein in his pediatric practice at 63rd and Troost. My father was always active in volunteering and gave back to the community. He started and ran the only cystic fibrosis clinic in the region for the KU Medical Center, and as a clinical professor, where he was the director for 39 years. He and my mother Raquel were very active in fundraising and organizing the Breath of Spring Ball, which was the major fundraiser for cystic fibrosis, all in the hope of finding a cure. Fortunately, my father saw a successful treatment regimen for cystic fibrosis in 2019. My father was a past president of Menorah Medical Center. He volunteered as a people-to-people host for more than 25 years. My mother and father raised 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. My father never once raised his voice or scolded us or spanked us. No one ever saw him angry, frustrated, or upset. He was on call 24/7, 7 days a week. He would go to the hospital every day to make rounds on the patients in the hospital. He would make house calls on the way home after seeing patients all day long. House calls. That's one of my fondest memories. If you wanted to see my father, the car, you heard him getting ready to go, you'd hop in the car, we'd go make house calls all day. That was the only way us kids could see him sometimes. Everyone from his past patients and their parents to his many, many friends come up to me and tell me what a wonderful, caring, and sweet man my father was. He was so loved by our family and our community. My father, like many others that have gone through such traumatic events, rarely speak about their stories. What happened to them? What they saw? Not until he was much older did he open up and tell us more. I remember remember when I first noticed the tattoo on my father's arm, I asked, Daddy, what happened? He did not want to tell us about his story because he wanted to protect us, the ones he loved, from feeling sad or hurting as he had suffered. We learned not to ask him because we also wanted to protect him from feeling sad or hurt. He had his tattoo removed after a patient told him they were feeling sorry for him, what he had gone through. He did not want anybody to know he was a Holocaust survivor. He wanted to be remembered as a person that was caring, loving, and always giving back. We must never forget the lives that were lost, destroyed, affected by the Holocaust. This must never happen again. I'm honored to be able to tell you my father's story, what happened to him in the Holocaust. But I hope you in history remember my father as who he really was. An incredible human being, a wonderful father and husband, a great doctor, and someone who did not let what happened to him define his life. After all he experienced, he chose to live with kindness and love for others. We should all choose kindness above anything else. To hear more of my father's story, you can visit the MCAG website or the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum websites. It is now a pleasure to call upon Mark Eisman, son of Holocaust survivor Gustav Eisman, of blessed memory, to introduce one of the most traditional, meaningful parts of this memorial service, the lighting of the 6 candles representing the 6 million Jewish victims. The candle lighters will be assisted by Debbie Coe, granddaughter of Leon and Helen Kasper, of blessed memory.
Throughout the world, in similar ceremonies, candles are lit in remembrance of the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children murdered in the Holocaust. The memory of the Holocaust reaches across our community, touching each of us. Today, representatives of 6 special groups will light candles. Holocaust survivors, children of Holocaust survivors, grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, Jewish youth from the Together We Remember program, Jewish war veterans, and the greater Kansas City community. Our first candle lighters are Yaakov and Reza Israelov. They're going to light a candle on behalf of the survivors of the Holocaust. Those of you in the audience who are survivors, please stand at this time and raise your hand. The second candle will be lit by Eli Kanarak, son of Dr. Joseph Kanarak of blessed memory. Those of you who are children of Holocaust survivors, please stand. Ethan and Oliver Kanarak, grandchildren of Dr. Joseph Kanarak of blessed memory, will light the third candle on behalf of the 3rd generation. Those of you who are grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, please stand. Michael Mueller of Congregation Beth Shalom will light the 4th candle, recognizing young people who are committed to learning about the Holocaust and becoming active messengers of its lessons. Those of you who participate or have participated in a youth program, please stand. Herb Spiegel of the Jewish War Veterans will light the 5th candle, honoring those who have served or continue to serve in our nation's armed forces. Those of you who are veterans who are currently serving in the military, please stand. And finally, Daniel Levine will light the 6th candle on behalf of the entire community. We ask everyone to rise as the 6 candles are lit.
My God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the breath of the heart.
There are stars up above, so far away you only see their lights. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we love. Their memories keep shining, ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. Shalom, Magia, Arsa, Raka, Hashem, and Raslam, Adivena. Yes, Shazim, Rameir, Hashem, and Raslam, of these are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. We remember. We remember.
Thank you so much, Grove Academy Choir, Grant Peter Academy Choir. You do such a wonderful job. Thank you. In 1958, local Holocaust survivors organized themselves into a group called the New Americans Club. These survivors established two lasting forms of Holocaust commemoration. Here, today, we continue the first, their annual Holocaust Memorial Service. The monument was the second. It is a tribute commemorating resistance in the Holocaust as well as those lost. Inscribed on the flames are the names of family members of those in our community. Without proper burials or graves to visit, this monument became the marker for those wishing to remember their loved ones murdered in the Holocaust. This year marks the 61st anniversary of the dedication of this memorial. Please stand as Leslie Zucker, Congregation Beth Torah, sings Zalmid King Wolf, the anthem of the Jewish resistance movement, and El Malai Rahman.
Så ditt kevolas du gästen letzten Weg, och stilen blejene förstäblöjete. Kommit ett noch unser oss gebete schon, Släppt bort und unser Trot für seinen Dom. Kommit ett noch unser oss gebete schon, Släppt bort und unser Trot für seinen Dom. Bremen Palmen lag dies einen Land von Schnee. Wir kommen nun mit unser Pein in unser Weg und begeben uns dieser Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Kuber und der Mund. Und begeben uns dieser Spritz von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Kuber und der Mund. This song was written with our blood and not with lead. This is no song of free birds flying overhead, but the people amid crumbling walls did stand. They stood and sang this song with rifles held in hand, but the people amid crumbling walls did stand. They stood and sang this song with rifles held in hand. So meet King Master Haste and blessed way. Goshim and Lion, Hashem, Loyate. Coming back noch unser Eis gebettet schon. Zet a point on unser Tod, wir sind da. Coming back noch unser Eis gebettet schon. Zet a point on unser Tod, wir seien da.
Please be seated. Thank you.
Beshalom al mishkav v'nomar Amen.
Now we can be seated. Rabbi Jonathan Rudnick of the JFS Community Chaplain will now share closing remarks and recite Kaddish in memory of the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who perished during the Holocaust, and in memory of survivors from our Kansas City community who have passed away.
As a thankful, lifelong patient of Dr. Kandarak, Zichrono Livracha, let me share with you from the JFS Chaplaincy Circle of Healing booklet of spiritual care resources from the introduction to the Kaddish. Kaddish is a meditation on life and liminal moments of living. prayer that offers a message of deep personal connection with God, expressing aspirational faith that despite where we are now and what is happening at the present, we will yet be okay. It's an uplifting expression of hope in which we reaffirm our partnership with God in creating, choosing, and living life. The mourner's Kaddish is a bridge between after death, acharei mot, and connection with holy ones, kadoshim. And this is exactly where we are right now. Between this past Torah portion, acharei mot, and the next one, this coming week, kadoshim. And that is what holy kadosh is, to set aside for a special connection with those who have died. For us today, those are so many of our people who were murdered in the Shoah. I was moved in November at the MCHE event marking Kristallnacht, when explicit mention was made of the heinous attack on Israel of October 7th. And who knew we would yet gather again now, today, on the 12th day of the Omer, still in the shadows of October 7th once again. Last night, we gathered outside the J for another, now monthly Havdalah vigil for the hostages in Gaza. If you're interested in receiving the notification of when those take place, please let the Jewish Federation know. In the Kaddish, we mention his name, Shmei, 3 times. Typically, we understand this as God's name as we reaffirm our commitment to continuing to live in this world despite the grief, loss, and pain we feel for those who have died, especially today and into tomorrow, those who died in the Shoah. The Kaddish is the affirmation in the words of Hatikvah that our hope is not lost, has not been lost, and will not be lost. Od lo avda tikvatenu. And today, in the spirit of remembering those victims of the Shoah and honoring their memories, I want to dedicate each name, each Shmei, respectively to her name, to his name, and to their collective name. And then we once again, and actually not once, but twice, pray fervently for that great yet elusive peace. Shlama Rabba. Shalom Rav. Please stand, if you're able, and join me in the Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabba, v'yamad yivrach Yehudei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chaye echon u'v'yom echon, v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba mevorach me'alam v'ormei Amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yisalav, Shmei v'kusha richu. Ve'ela minko b'yachata v'shirata, v'tushbachata v'nechemata, Damiran v'yamar v'yiru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba mi Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yiru amen. Oseh shalom v'romav, v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yiru amen.
This concludes our program. We invite survivors and their families to join us at the memorial to 6 million for an additional Kaddish prayer, weather permitting, depending on the rain. It will begin in 10 minutes. Thank you for attending and thank you for remembering.